Hi, my name is Dusty, and I've been creating a series of videos going over Instagram strategies for makers. I've got 3 of them up already that go over kind of the broad strategy, the mechanics of it, and now I want to do a video that explains why it's so important. Not only important, why it's the most effective thing that I've found that's helped my business to grow and helped me to achieve my objectives. So if you step back and look at it, this whole social media idea is relatively new. And I grew up before the internet came out. Like, I'm in that micro generation where we grew up analog and then transferred to digital and had to adapt to things. I didn't have a cell phone when I grew up. And so I'm still kind of like 1 foot in that analog age and 1 foot in the digital. And so when I started the business, you look at a lot of the conventional wisdom, like go to trade shows, put out pamphlets, do mailers, go cold call people and do things like that. And that's how you built a business before, but it's very time consuming and your reach is very limited. So one of the hallmarks of the traditional business model is to go out to trade shows. And there are costs to trade shows, and you've got to have a really good strategy. So the costs of going to the trade show are, number one, your booth, obviously, and then the cost to get into the trade show. But there's also something called opportunity cost. This is what economists refer to the income or revenue that you would have missed out on if you weren't doing that thing. So by spending 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 days standing there, smiling at people, hoping they'll come talk to you, you could have been in your shop working and making money. So if your shop usually makes whatever it is, $100 a day, $1,000 a day, it doesn't really matter. That's the opportunity cost of being there. And so you spend your money, and I've spent anywhere from a few $100s to attend a trade show to $10,000 to net, right? Like, I didn't spend $10,000 to get in, but it might have been $3,000 to get into a big trade show, and then I might have spent $2,000 or $3,000 on my booth. And then if I stood there for 3 or 4 days, plus the cost of hotels and the cost of everything, it ends up costing like $10,000. And so as a businessman, you have to look and say, I'm going to spend about $10,000 trying to do this, and I need to get more than $10,000 worth of income out of it. And so if you're in a big town, so the biggest one I did was up in Calgary. Calgary has like 1 million, 2 million, 4 people or something like that. And it was the Home and Garden Show. And so you take this population of 1.3 million people, and then the event tries to attract as many as possible. And maybe they get like 80,000 followers or maybe 100,000 followers over the 3 or 4 day period, and they come walking through. And then your goal is to be on an aisle and to make a booth that kind of catches people's eye, and to stand there and to do it and smile at people in a way that's inviting and friendly, but not overly uncomfortable, so they'll come and talk to you. And different people want a different type of eye contact, and maybe they don't want you to look at them. Maybe you should say hi, maybe you shouldn't. And so you take these, let's say 100,000 people, and they're wandering around, and not all of them are going to come to where you're at, and you might have been on a bathroom break or whatever. And so you take that 100,000 people, and of that 100,000, maybe only 10% of them, maybe only 10,000 people are actually even somewhat interested in what you have to offer. And you're one of a number of booths that's already in there. So they're walking by, and then they might actually like your stuff, and they might want to consume or buy your stuff, but you seem too aggressive or too forward, or you seem too distant and too retracted, or you're sitting on a bench and you're too lazy and you're on your phone, so you don't seem that interested in it. And so you slowly take this 100,000 people, well, not even, like you take the overall population of the city, you reduce it to the number of people that attend the event, then you reduce it to the number of people who actually care about your stuff, and then you reduce it to the number of people who you smile at the right way and they come and talk to you. And then you hope that you make more than $10,000, and maybe you attend 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 during the year. And hopefully, at the end of the day, that's profitable. Now, why is social media vastly superior to that model? Social media, when you get good at it, you actually don't have to spend a lot of time. Once you've set the system up and you've drawn your parameters and you've figured out the audience that you're trying to appeal to, and you've gained a following, all of a sudden your reach isn't only the city that you're in, and isn't only the people that are attending the event, and it's not only for that 2 or 3 or 4 day weekend that you're at the event. You can access people within a genre, within a hashtag, within a demographic, any day of the week, all year long, at any hour of the day. And so your reach is way, way, way better. Not only that, this whole filtering of 1.4 million down to 100,000, down to 10,000, down to whatever the deal is, it happens logarithmically on Instagram. people are going on and they're consuming different things on YouTube and on Google, and the internet, the service providers, the Google people that are out there, they're tracking all this, and they start feeding you the stuff that you have a high probability of consuming. So if people are already online looking for the widgets that you make, Instagram, Google, Facebook, everybody already knows that. And if you're on there, then they're going to start pushing them over to you, because their goal is to get people onto their app and then to feed them what they're looking for. And if they've already been looking for widgets and it turns out that you sell widgets, then you're kind of out in front of them. And you can increase your possibility of that by building up this following over time. It doesn't happen immediately, right? Like you're not going to have success on Instagram immediately. And maybe if you just said, I could either go this weekend to a trade show, or I could just sit here and hope people like me on Instagram, then in that compartment, of course the trade show is better. But if you say, look, I want to develop a business model long-term over time, and my objectives are to spend as much time as I can making stuff that I actually like making, spend as little time as possible traveling and going to trade shows and making booths and standing there and having sore ankles, staying in hotels and stuff like that, then Instagram, TikTok, social media is way, way, way better. Not only that, it costs way less. So eventually there comes a point where you don't have to spend any money on ad revenue. There is a point at the beginning where I highly recommend it, where you do promotions on both Facebook and Instagram, and you do some beta tests and you kind of figure out what your demographic is and what your age group is, and what postal codes or zip codes you want to approach. Initially, obviously, it's going to be locally around you. And then eventually, if you have a commodity that can be packaged and sold, you can sell all over the world, which is awesome, because now the whole world is your trade show. That's the whole idea, is that social media makes the whole world your trade show. And you're giving it to people on their own terms. So somebody might have wanted to come to the trade show. They would have probably bought a whole lot of your stuff, but they had the flu that week and they didn't make it. And so you have to wait a whole nother year to come back, and hopefully they're not sick and they can make it to the trade show and they can do that. But sitting there, if they have the flu and they're at home, what are they doing? They're sitting on their phone. So they're sitting on their phone, they're going by and they're like, oh, there's something that I want to go ahead and buy that. And so when you start doing these promotions, you can spend, and I would spend maybe $10 or $5 or $25. Rarely did I spend more than $100 on an ad campaign to try and get out in front of people. And I never struck out. I never spent $100 and didn't make more than $100. I never spent $25 and didn't make more than $25. And even if I did, it seemed like a really reasonable cost. Like on the one hand, you're willing to spend hundreds or tens of thousands of dollars to go to a trade show, and you hope and pray that it works out, but you're unwilling to spend $25 on a Facebook ad. Furthermore, it's even more superior because you go to the trade show, and once you've paid your fee, which is months in advance usually, and you're there, there's no calling it quits halfway through. You can't get through day one and say that this wasn't satisfactory. I didn't get in front of as many people as I wanted to, and you go to the event organizers and you say, I'd like all my money back, and you go to the hotel and you say, I'd like my money back for being at the hotel, and you'd like to go cash in all the money that you spent on your deal. You spend your money and that's it. It's a front-loaded contract and there's no getting it back. There were times when I did Instagram and Facebook promotions and they weren't performing well. You can just pause the promotion. You can stop whenever you want. It's highly customizable. You have total control in your hand. So you get to access the entire world. You easily get to define the parameters of who you're trying to attract. You get to speak to them and approach them on their own terms in a non-offensive way. You're completely taking out the goofy eye contact smile component of the trade shows. They don't have to look at you if they don't want to, and they get to consume your content at their leisure whenever they want, on the toilet if they prefer. And so now for real, right? Like I did trade shows. Don't get me wrong. I went to trade shows and I think that they played a role in my success, especially like the smaller curated ones, you know, where they have a little bit of music playing and it's got a theme and it's about makers and stuff like that. Those ones are way more effective than the really big home and garden shows I found for what I was doing anyways. And I think a lot of you are makers. And so when it's like a couple $100 to participate in it and it's probably only 1 or 2 days, those seem really reasonable. Like the risk reward thing is really reasonable. And I never really felt like I struck out there as well. I just feel that if you could only do one of them, that developing a social media network is far superior than the trade shows. But the trade shows are still cool. Like I'm not advocating don't go to trade shows. I'm just saying, as an entrepreneur, what you're trying to do is say, how can I be most effective with my money and my ads to achieve my objectives? Now, ultimately, I would assume that your objectives were very similar to mine, is that you wanted to have a high enough income to support your family. You wanted to be able to do something that you actually love to do, that you love to make. and you want to work for yourself, and that's sometimes good and sometimes bad, right? Like my job starts from the time my eyes open till the time my eyes close. Luckily, I like what I do, and so it's not that bad. And that doesn't mean that I work every hour of every day, but I work a lot. I don't work 9 to 5, and I work weekends and things like that sometimes, but luckily I like what I do, so it's not necessarily a job. So initially you spend all this time on Instagram, and this is the point that I'm trying to make, is you start spending a whole bunch of time. It's very thankless at the beginning. You do a whole lot of heavy lifting and a whole lot of work for very little positive reinforcement. But then later you do relatively what feels like less work for way more reward. And very few people get past that first stage. It's very similar to workout, right? That there's a high percentage of the population on Earth, this is the way humans act, that on January 1st buy a workout program, start attending the gym. And then January 21st to the 30th, there's a very low percentage of those that are actually doing it. The heavy lifting sucks, and anatomically, biologically, I don't know what it is, but we just don't have a whole lot of patience beyond 3 weeks. And so most people quit. But all the good stuff happens after that. If you can just have the foresight to say, there's not going to be a lot of positive reinforcement initially. I'm going to be putting in way more work than I feel that I'm getting out of it. But it's on the back end where you get all the rewards. And this is what I mean. So I haven't spent any dollars on advertising in 2 years. I haven't spent a cent on advertising in 2 years. I have way more work than I can handle. And what's nice as a maker is I only say yes to stuff. I have so many people asking for stuff to be made that I get to pick and choose. So I love woodworking. I love to make stuff with my hands, but there are some things that I don't want to make, either because it's not that inspiring, it's basically just an IKEA replica something that someone needs really quick and easy, and they want me to compete with the price of IKEA furniture, or they want me to do it so cheap that it's not that fun. Like you want to be rewarded for your skill set, your talent, and the tools and materials. And there's a nice balance there where if people are willing to pay what you think that you're worth, and what they want you to do is something that's inspiring and mentally stimulating for you, that's where the magic happens. And so over time, at the beginning, I did anything. I just needed money. So I did anything that anybody wanted. You need a shelf? Yep, I can make you a shelf. You need a sign? Yep, I can make you a sign. You need me to come and fur out your wall? I can come fur out your wall. I'm going to build you some stairs? I'll build you some stairs. Because all I was trying to do was feed my family at that point, and I didn't really care that I was happy with my job. I just had to make some money. As time went on, though, I started getting more and more and more orders, so I started saying no to stuff that either I didn't feel was worth my time, or I just didn't want to do. And then fast forward now, 5-6 years later, I only do the things that I want to do, that I like to do, that I find inspiring, or if it's not that inspiring, I charge enough for it and people are willing to pay enough for it that the money is enough to offset the fact that it's not that intellectually stimulating. And that's awesome. So if I could say to you, if you do social media right, you'll never actually have to attend another trade show. You'll never have to spend $1 on advertising, and the network itself that you've created and the followers that you've created, the momentum you've created, will be enough to sustain the lifestyle that you wanted, which was to do your craft and do only the things that you like to do, and to have a very low stress life for the amount of money that you're making. And that's ultimately what we're after as entrepreneurs, isn't it? We want to be happy and satisfied with the thing that we're doing. We want to make enough money to support our needs. Like I don't have a yacht or a private jet or anything. I'm not rich by any imagination, but I'm really happy with my life. This is the happiest I've ever been in my life, with my career, with the stuff that I do on a daily basis, the amount of money that I make for the amount of input that I give, the type of things that I get to do. And I honestly think that a huge component of that came from social media, primarily Instagram. I started off, Facebook was my initial thing, and I spent a lot of time on Facebook, and I thought that was sort of the bee's knees. Somebody recommended to go onto Instagram, and initially I didn't really think that it was that successful. I didn't think that it was that good, and so I did it for a bit, and then didn't, and then not, and then I did it again and didn't, and stopped doing it. And then there came a point where a lot of my attention migrated from Facebook over to Instagram, because Instagram is superior in the way that it reaches people. Facebook was more about organically reaching out to family and friends, and really relied on people sharing your stuff. And so the concept and invention of hashtags, where you get to be out on a whole bunch of pages competing with other people in those hashtags, is way superior to just putting stuff on Facebook and really hoping that family and friends or followers share your stuff, which was the only way to kind of get more and more, or you had to pay for it. You could pay for more attention, or you could hope that people would share your stuff. And putting your fate in the hands of the hope that people would share your stuff is kind of naive. And it's disappointing for you because you're like, oh, I won't. If people would just share my stuff. You need to limit as much as possible relying on other people to make your life happen. So Instagram, it felt like I was more in control. I chose the hashtags. I chose the time to post. I determined how frequently I post, how much effort I put into it, and if I did it right, and I believed in karma, and I put my best foot forward, and I produced content that I wanted to consume, that I thought was compelling, that I think other people would want to consume, that I had a long-term belief that would pay off, and it did. And now, and I don't mean this in a flexing way, I am really happy with my life. I'm really happy with where I am. I'm excited about the projects that I do. No job is awesome every day. That's false. Like when I hear people say, if you do something that you love, you'll never work a day in your life and stuff. That's crap. I mean, you're gonna work less days of your life, but there's always some days where you don't want to be doing it. There's always some, like I gotta go clean up all this sawdust. I don't love sweeping up sawdust. I don't want to go and clean out that dust bag, and sometimes I let it go too much and it gets all dirty and dusty. But all things considered, I don't know what else I would rather be doing, and I feel like I've really achieved my goals, in fact, beyond my goals from what I wanted to start doing 5 years ago. And I honestly attribute it, the majority of it, to a good social media strategy that I developed over time. I never thought I'd sell stuff to France and Germany and overseas, and I never thought, that I would, it's really cool. I've sold stuff all over North America, all over Europe and stuff. I never thought, when I put a piece of furniture on an airplane in Calgary and it flies overseas, I make the same amount of money on it, but how could I have come up with a trade show idea to make that happen? Let's say that I had the objective that I wanted to sell something to somebody in South Africa. It'd be like, find a trade show in South Africa, build a booth, somehow ship it all the way over, go and spend time there, adjust to the time zone, stand in the deal, and hope that somebody in South Africa buys it off you. It's an entirely front-loaded contract with no guarantees on the back end. And now all of my overseas stuff, or the crazy places that I've sent things, I didn't even reach out. I didn't come up with a strategy to try sell to somebody in France. The nature of the reach of social media did that by itself. And all of a sudden someone from France is like, hey man, can you send me something to France? And I said, sure. It's awesome. So I know what I'm trying to say, I guess, is that I know some of the hesitations that you're feeling. I know some of the reluctance that you have. I know you're thinking, I don't know if this is worth it over time. And my opinion is that it is. I can't guarantee you're going to be a success. And I don't know every one of your individual deals. If you are a very, very local service provider that you can't ship anything out, it's not necessarily exactly what I did. There's a component of my strategy that contemplated that, because initially my strategy was focused around selling stuff to people around me as opposed to a broader audience. That expanded later on. And so I think that if you are a plumber or a painter or a massage therapist and stuff, and it's not something that you can export out, there definitely is a strategy and you should do it. I can't tell you exactly what to do, but if you have a commodity, you have a thing, you're a maker and you can send stuff out, Instagram is an amazing place to have that happen. Furthermore, when a lot of us as makers start out, we mass produce something. And what we look for is we look for a thing that somebody else built, and we think, I can buy that same stuff, the same materials, and I can probably make it quicker and faster, and I would be willing to sell it for less. And so if there's a $100 item out there and there's $40 into the material cost of the good, and someone's selling it for $100, you say, I'd be willing to do it for $95. And so I'll take less profit, but I'll be able to make it. And so you end up competing with a really broad range of individuals that are all selling the exact same thing that's not really that distinguishable from one another. And you try to tell your clients that mine's superior in some way and I have a competitive advantage because of this and because of that. But you're really all fighting over, and I did this, all right? And I did this. I made a lot of these signs and things like that. And it was fun, but I didn't really find that day in, day out, week in, week out, mass producing low cost goods for low profit was that fun. Definitely put food on my table. It definitely fed my kids, but it wasn't that exciting and fun for me. It wasn't intellectually stimulating. It just wasn't that fun. And I think that Instagram provided me with the opportunity to grow my product offering slowly into the things that I actually wanted to make. And when you start to have more of an audience, you can on the side go and just make a thing that you want to make, and somebody will see it. And if you've got hundreds of thousands of people that are seeing your content, somebody might say, I'd like a table, right? Or I'd like a mantle, or I'd like something else that I'd like to do. So it's a way for you to start off and make money, build an audience, but also slowly move towards what your dream would actually be. Being an artisan that is making high profit on highly customizable stuff, as opposed to somebody who, as quick as they can, mass produces the ever-living crap out of a standard item that's readily available on the market today. So that's my honest opinion. I really think that it's worth it. And I think the investment that you're going to make, the time investment that you're going to make into social media in the long run is worth it. And if I look back and had to do it all over again, the only thing that I would change is now knowing, like in hindsight, some of the things that I wouldn't do, some of the things that I found counterproductive, or some things that fell flat on their face. And I'm trying to share that as much as possible, so maybe you don't make some of the same mistakes. And the time to achieve the goals that you have is hopefully less. Like instead of doing it in the 5 years that I did it, maybe you can do it in 2.5, 3. That'll be awesome.